Okay, it's 10 o'clock, so let's get started. First of all, welcome to everyone. Thanks for coming today. My name is John Kingsbury. I'm Head of Digital Economy and Creative Industries at the KTN. And today I'm representing UK 5G. So the job of an MC is that you get an opportunity to plug your own thing before the main event, which is today's briefing for 5G Infotainment. And just a few words to say, we've got a banner here for UK 5G Innovation Network, which if you haven't registered, please do join. It's a networking organisation dedicated to accelerating the adoption and rollout of 5G in the UK. And we're funded by the DCMS. And so please join. The benefit of registering on uk5g.org is that you get access to information about all of the funding opportunities, the latest market research, events, and other R&D activities that are happening across the UK and beyond. So please do join us. So the plug out of the way for today, I hope you're in the room to hear about the latest 5G funding competition, which is 5G Infotainment Services for Transport Environments. And this is a collaboration, I'm very pleased to say, between the UK and the South Koreans. And we've got some guests over from South Korea today. Welcome to Junhwan Lee and his colleagues. Thank you very much for coming over, and you'll have an opportunity to hear from them a bit later on in our presentation. There are really two objectives for today. The first is to make sure that you guys learn everything you can learn about the competition, the scope, the nature, the background, what it's intended to do and how it's intended to operate, such that you can make a decision about whether or not you'd like to apply and work with our Korean partners in some really, really exciting 5G projects. So that's the first opportunity, and there'll be plenty of chances for you as we go through the presentations to ask questions. We're also very happy to welcome people who are online. We're streaming and webcasting today as well as filming it. So there will be some questions coming in over the internet, we hope. When we get to the Q&A session, if I can ask you, obviously, to wait for a microphone because we're recording today. And after today's briefing event, we'll be putting the film of today up online with all of the application details. And generally, people who want to make an application find the filming very helpful. Okay, so you will be on camera if you ask a question. If you're just sat in the audience, we will try not to film you. But if you do ask a question, we'll capture that and that will be recorded. The other objective for today is if you're interested in applying, please use the many opportunities that you'll have for networking. It's a great space here at the IET. We've got teas and coffees all day, and please be socially promiscuous and find people that you might actually want to partner with on this particular competition. I know a few of you in the room, and the organisations that you're from, very impressive, so please take the time over teas and coffees and lunch to find out more. And a bit later on, we'll be giving you the opportunity to talk about your organisations as well. There's no fire alarm today, so if a fire alarm does go off, it's for real. So please make your way out through those doors. Please feel free to tweet what goes on here today and comment on social media and tell the world. And everything that we'll be talking about today is already published online. So there's a page on uk5g.org all about the competition, and also on gov.uk as well. So feel free to take notes, to make important points, but please don't feel that you need to take photos of the screen or write copious notes, because it's all up online. Okay, so just running through the introductions. We've got a number of speakers today. That's me from UK 5G, KTN. We've got Simon Fletcher from Real Wireless Limited. Junhwan Lee from ETRI in South Korea will be speaking. In a moment, I'll hand you over to Louise Lancaster to give you a bit of an overview about the government's 5G programme. And on hand, should we need him to answer difficult questions about the grant process and contracting process, we've got Jacob from the DCMS. I'm hoping that we won't need to call on him, but who knows? Maybe you'll have a difficult question. And the agenda for today, as I said, we're going to have Louise give an overview of the DCMS 5G programme. Then Simon is going to give a presentation about the competition scope. Junhwan's going to come up and talk a bit about the technology infrastructure that's going to be available for this competition in Korea. And then we'll have opportunities for a Q&A around the scope of the competition. Then we're going to have a break and come back at 11:30 when I'll be going through the application process and the eligibility. And this bit will take a bit of time because we'll quite methodically and systematically go through that application process. For those of you who are aware of and au fait with Innovate UK competitions, you'll see that actually what we've tried to do is follow a standard format for that, because we felt it's helpful for those people who are used to making applications into UK 5G. But we'll make sure that there are no surprises as we walk you through that. And then there'll be a Q&A on the application process, time for lunch, and then after lunch, I think some of you have sent through some slides to have a pitching session whereby if you're looking for partners, you've provided us with a couple of slides to come up and give a 2-minute pitch about your organisation and what you might be looking for. If you haven't given us slides but would still like to come up and do that after lunch, please come and find me or my colleagues at lunch, and we'll arrange that to happen, because feedback from previous briefing sessions is that it's actually very useful to find out what other people are looking for when you're thinking about putting an application together. So I hope that's pretty clear. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Louise Lancaster from DCMS. Louise.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. As John said, I'm just going to provide an overview of the government's 5G testbeds and trials programme as some context for this particular project. In 2018, the government conducted the Future Telecoms Infrastructure Review, which was a wide-ranging review of the future requirements for fixed and mobile infrastructure in the UK. And the review made a number of recommendations, including the need to make it easier and cheaper and faster to deploy infrastructure, supporting infrastructure models that promote competition and investment, and network densification and network extension, stimulating demand for new use cases, in particular for 5G, through the 5G testbeds and trials programme, and securing a diverse set of innovative 5G services through innovative spectrum policy. In terms of government targets, we have a target to reach 95% 4G coverage by 2022 in terms of the geographic landmass of the UK. We are looking for 15 million premises connected to full fibre by 2025, and we want to be a world leader in 5G. The 5G testbeds and trials programme has been set up with clear objectives to accelerate the deployment of 5G networks and ensure that the UK can take early advantage of the applications that those networks can enable, to maximise productivity and efficiency benefits to the UK from 5G, and to create new opportunities for UK businesses at home and abroad and encourage inward investment. We also have a vision that should tie us closely to what citizens and businesses operating in the UK will firmly support. a lot of public sentiment in social media suggests that the public doesn't yet understand that 5G embraces and unifies many areas of technology, but also that it's about integrating existing and new technologies to deliver ubiquitous connectivity to support everyone's daily life better than ever before. Successful delivery depends on bringing together use cases inside and outside buildings, in sparsely populated and crowded spaces, and in fixed and mobile environments. It will integrate thinking end to end and truly consider user experience throughout. It should change the economics of the industry and invite many more players to take part, new and innovative players alongside established global companies. So it's quite a busy slide, which is an overview of phase 1 of the 5G testbeds and programs, which saw a number of really exciting projects. We have 2 rural projects, one called 5G Rural Integrated Testbed, or 5GRIT, which looks at precision farming, AR/VR applications in tourism, and the provision of internet services to remote communities. Alongside that, there is the 5G Rural First rural project, operating in Orkney and Shropshire and Somerset, which, as well as looking at those sort of agricultural use cases, they're also working with the BBC to look at broadcasting, unicasting, and how they can use 5G to innovate in that area. There is the Liverpool 5G testbed, which is providing healthcare to economically deprived communities in an urban setting. There is the Worcester 5G Consortium, which is a manufacturing testbed, which is enabling things like predictive maintenance and improvements in productivity for the companies involved in that project. 5G Smart Tourism, which operates in Bath and Bristol, is providing innovative applications, for example, in the Roman baths. And AutoAir, which is a project at the Millbrook Racing Proving Ground racetrack. And there's a small cell deployment there, and it is demonstrating the ability to use 5G to hand over 4K video to cars passing at high speed between the cells. The next project we're looking at is a large-scale project called Urban Connected Community. In September 2018, the government announced that the West Midlands Combined Authority was to be the lead partner in the Urban Connected Communities project. This initiative is expected to launch in 2019 and run until 2021, and will see the development of a large-scale 5G pilot across the region, with hubs in cities such as Birmingham, Coventry, and Wolverhampton. The project will design wireless infrastructure to deliver high-quality connectivity and allow new 5G applications to be trialled in a number of sectors. It will allow industry to test different deployment models for 5G infrastructure and help inform the development of policy and regulation to support 5G deployment. It will support economic growth and improve the quality of life of citizens using 5G connectivity in public and commercial areas. Up to £50 million is currently available for the UCC, subject to approval of the business plan. This includes £25 million of DCMS funding, and additional funding may be made available at a later stage. All public funding will be matched by commercial funding. The project will provide the opportunity to use new technologies in public and commercial services to improve the quality of life for residents and visitors. It will also support economic development by stimulating the 5G ecosystem and encompassing multiple industry sectors. Citizen well-being incorporating health, social care and emergency services will be an early focus of the programme. The programme will incorporate a balanced mix of technology R&D and larger scale market trials, seeking to prove the appetite for significant private investment. During the current mobilisation phase, detailed plans for each work stream are being finalised, alongside early delivery showcases to highlight the benefits for citizens in the local area. We are also developing options for one or more large-scale rural projects. This will launch in 2019 as well and also run until 2021. The Rural Connected Communities project will coordinate the development of 5G services and applications through a series of trials and testbeds, which should contribute to the development of the 5G ecosystem. The projects will look to test commercial models as put forward in the Future Telecoms Infrastructure Review and build the business case and provide evidence for extended rural mobile coverage. The RCC will help promote demand for services from consumers, enterprises, and the public sector in rural areas, and will also explore how neutral host infrastructure sharing and spectrum sharing can be used to improve incentives to invest. To reflect the challenging economics of providing connectivity in rural areas, DCMS plans to use the RCC programme to explore new technical solutions and commercial models, the evidence from which will help improve coverage. Transportation projects. We've been looking at highways connectivity. The government has allocated £5 million to improve future productivity through trialling 5G connectivity on the road network. The consultancy firm Atkins was chosen to carry out a feasibility study to determine the potential for investment into connectivity improvements. They worked alongside Real Wireless and White Willow, as well as the mobile network operators and Highways England, to identify the short-term and medium-term demand for connectivity to ensure that the road network is fit for the future. Next steps on that project will be announced shortly. In terms of rail connectivity, Network Rail's test track facility, the Rail Innovation and Development Centre, known as RIDIC, at Melton Mowbray, has recently undergone an upgrade. And there is general agreement from the market that RIDIC could be used to deliver relevant product approval to enable radio equipment to be operational within the rail corridor, and that it will be an asset for future 5G technology testing on the railway corridor. We also want to launch some sector-specific projects focusing on specific vertical industry sectors. The programme has allocated around £25 million to support several sector project testbeds, which will need to be matched with commercial funding. And based on sector analysis work undertaken by DCMS, we envisage that these projects will focus on manufacturing and logistics sectors, though we will also consider opportunities in other sectors. Organisations interested in being part of the initial engagement with industry as part of the sector testbeds and trials projects can go to digitalcatapult.org for more information and contact details, and further details will be published later this year. And in terms of international engagement, we learn from international experience in order to identify best practice and inform UK 5G trials and policy. We form partnerships between testbeds and trials in the UK and complementary activities in other countries, of which this is a good example, to enhance learnings. And we look to help build the business case for investment in the UK 5G ecosystem and explore opportunities for 5G related UK businesses to expand their footprint overseas. And we also promote the UK's 5G competencies and ecosystem globally. And I don't need to tell you about UK 5G because John has already done that. But I urge you all to join the UK 5G Innovation Network. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. It's always nice when someone else does the plug for you. So thanks very much. And of course, as well as the link to the catapult for the sector information. In fact, all of the information about the testbeds and trials project as they come to fruition are up on uk5g.org, as well as information about the rural competitions and the transport competitions as they emerge. So really, uk5g.org is the place to register to find out about all of these upcoming competitions. So thank you very much. And you have to rush off, don't you, back to Westminster. But I think if there are any questions about the broader programme, we've got Jacob here to answer some questions. So thank you very much. I think sitting at the back and watching that presentation, it was apparent actually just how committed the UK government is to providing support around innovation around 5G. I mean, it's a very impressive set of initiatives. We're here today to talk about infotainment and career, but again, this is just one of many and several initiatives. So perhaps if today's briefing on the UK Career Project isn't quite right for you, then please come and talk to us during the day to see how else UK 5G might be able to plug you into some of these other things going in. But I'd like to invite now Simon Fletcher from Real Wireless to come up and talk about the scope and the background of 5G infotainment. Simon, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. So thank you, John, for the introduction. I know quite a few faces in the room, and as John said, it's a good collection of capabilities here, and I'm sure many of you will find this an interesting project. I was, or am, a member of the advisory board for UK 5G, and one of my roles there is to engage in and to have oversight in the international programme. And I was delighted to be able to sign an MOU with the 5G Forum last year during the Olympics. And so it's fantastic now to see a few months later the fruition of some of that thinking in terms of the objective, which was to start to get some international collaboration activities moving. And so really I'd just like to give a high-level view. All the details that are in these slides, as John says, are available in written form on the website. I'm not going to read word for word what's on these slides. So I just want to emphasise some of the key points from the scope of the project and sort of technical ambition and what we'd like to get some interest in the project around those. So, sorry, I'm just looking for the, okay. So in terms of the programme aims, clearly we're looking to enable a trade narrative here. That's important. So one of the important things that we discussed at the start of trying to create this project concept was the counterparts in Korea are aware of the aspirations and interests from a UK perspective in terms of creating the opportunity for whoever, the consortium who engages in this project, getting insights into the context of the trial, but also gaining some insights into the possibility of using the project as a stepping stone towards into Korean market and Asia more widely. So that's an important point in terms of thinking about the trade opportunity and looking at the partnership, industrial partnerships, UK to Korea, and that wider context is very much to be encouraged here in terms of how the project is formed and how it progresses. Cross-fertilisation of expertise is also highly desirable here. There is no question that South Korea has some of the most advanced communication infrastructure globally. Very impressive performance figures. If you've looked at the peak and average system throughputs for advanced 4G networks in Korea and Seoul, they put the UK to shame in many ways. And so, you know, we have a very good opportunity here to see some very advanced communications infrastructure and learning and cross-fertilisation. And of course, the UK is very well known for a great deal of innovation in terms of user experience, apps, and an understanding of how networks work and how you can deliver services over networks. So we see as a great possibility of synergies here and cross-fertilisation of expertise. Lowering costs, that the objective here in that regard is we're focusing here on, and I'll come on to this point a bit later, but you know, we're looking for something that's a commercial proposition within 2 to 3 years of the completion of the project. So, you know, that obviously necessitates a degree of understanding of the costs and cognizant that if this is an extremely complex and expensive demonstration that has no pathways to exploitation, then it's difficult to justify such an activity. So we need to be looking at the cost narrative in terms of how these technologies could be delivered and how the demonstrator gives a roadmap towards that. And the aspiration to be for the UK to be a leader in 5G is always there. Clearly, we've already heard that aspiration in terms of the broader UK 5G programme. So the background, as I said, you know, South Korea is a leading 5G country, and here's a statement from Margot Jones, the Minister for Digital. And the aspiration here is, you know, sets this nicely in context, this statement. So world leader in services is the aspiration, it's what we want to be as the UK, and collaboration with South Korea, you know, it's a great opportunity for everyone who can take it to engage in the project. And what's important here in this project is set in the context of enabling a collaboration with universities as well as industry. Universities are welcome, research institutes are welcome to take part, as well as industrial players. Now, a lot of what we're doing here is encouraging the research-backed knowledge creation, and then how that feeds into engineering talent, and looking at the exploitation and the pathways to innovative products and services. So, quick summary of the project. We're looking for new and novel applications and services. And importantly, because you'll see from the presentation from our career counterparts that we're in a sort of a advanced 4G capable infrastructure scenario here in terms of what's available in the environment for the trial. But our eyes are firmly fixed on how to migrate solutions towards a fully 5G capable platform in the future. So although when you see the presentation from our career counterparts, you may say, well, that looks a bit 4G plus Wi-Fi oriented, and it is. But you know, it works as an environment and it shows a fully capable connectivity platform. But the idea is to focus on 5G readiness in terms of the solution. We do want to have the solution tested, or the application tested in a real life environment. That's very important. So the trials will be carried out in Korea, not demonstrated in the UK in a small test bed and then say, well, that's proof positive. We do actually want to do a trial in a real life environment and demonstrate some proof points and proof of concept points. The environment will be, most of the environment will be provided by the South Koreans. Of course, for those who are bringing the application server and other solution components into the project from the UK side, they will need to provision some of that hardware and software capability. And it's about testing the live deployment of infotainment services. Now, the actual environment that we're going to be looking at is a subway environment in Seoul, and it will be limited in terms of what we can do with that. You know, the geographic area, the area of the track is predetermined, but again, important that we're looking for solution concepts that would allow for extension towards other forms of transport and travelling at greater speeds. So you may get the impression that we're looking here, this is in our mind the first step on an exploratory project that could go further, but I won't say any more than that at this stage, but we're looking for that flexibility in terms of the proposition such that that could be possible in the future. The funding is 1.2 million, grant funded, and it's match funded. So in total, the fund across UK and Korea is 2.4 million. And here's some detail on the funding. So we're looking for scale. So it will be grant funded, and the usual rules apply there in terms of percentage of funds that you can draw down depending on the class of organisation that you are. But it's a single collaborative consortium, and we're looking for a minimum bid of around $1 million, anything up to 1.2. So it gives you a feel for the size of the project that we're thinking about here. Now, the scope in terms of services, we're putting this as infotainment. And this is principally the value proposition. This is the core value proposition of the UK side. We're really looking for this statement here really is around what it could include. We don't want to be too prescriptive, but broadly, infotainment. So you can imagine we're talking about sort of media content, services that help people move around and in context and environment. Media could be video or sound. It could be based on platforms such as augmented reality, but it needs to be something where it's going to be usable in a public space. It might be the typical user could be a tourist or a commuter. And it's going to be within the city context. So these are broadly how we're defining the infotainment services. So they need to be applicable in that context broadly. We'd ideally like the application, the solution, the applicants to be thinking about traffic management as well, if they can. So what do we mean by that in terms of traffic management? We're not talking about traffic over data networks here. I'm talking about, if it's a relatively dense city environment, the tourists, this is people moving around in a city. Management of commuter flows may or may not be a value proposition here. So information that's helping people to move around or migrate around a context or an environment. Perhaps could feed into a broader picture, perhaps with a data engine that allows you to think about the management of flows of people, helping to reduce overcrowding, etc. Ideally, providing uninterrupted infotainment. So we're looking for the context here as seamless. How do we make this experience seamless? Now, there will be physical constraints there in terms of how we can make the seamless experience work, because you'll see the trials environment is relatively constrained in terms of its context. But an understanding in the broader construct about how you can make a seamless experience is important in terms of the proposition. The user experience challenges that we think we may encounter with this project. I think principally this is a metro environment, and there will be ultra fast connectivity to the train. Now, in the order of 1.5 gigabits per second. That sort of backhauling capability is available to the train. Now, that puts us in terms of a context, in terms of the sort of system connectivity that's available from the moving vehicle to the infrastructure, in the order of 1.5 gigabits per second. So what can we think in terms of user experience challenges there that maybe need to be taken on board? How do we maintain high quality of service, travelling between multiple stations? Safety and security for passengers in a busy environment. Now, of course, what we're thinking there is a solution that's talking about everyone walking around in virtual reality headsets isn't likely to be a goer. So think a little bit about how this is going to work in a real environment. Developing services which may provide an experience or an immersive experience in a busy and confined space. So we're thinking about city, we're thinking about transport environments in cities. Dynamic services. How do you, in the context of this environment, provide a number of different ways in which the services can be consumed and the experience in terms of the services that are offered? And they need to ideally match to the timescales of a commuter. So if you're delivering a 2-hour film to a commuter, it's not going to work in the context of this project. That's something that is a user experience that is digestible during the course of this journey of a commuter or a tourist or whatever the context that you'd like to promote. The technical challenges here. Now, what we're quite keen on, although you'll see from the presentation from our Korean counterparts, they've got a very capable connectivity platform. From the UK side, we'd still like to make sure that the consortium has cognizance or understanding of communications issues, because, as we say, the context of the testbed at this stage is 4G advanced / Wi-Fi based platform, and we need to have a narrative that helps us to draw it towards a more integrated 5G-like connectivity environment. So therefore, we need the consortium to have the capability to think about how to overcome those ready for 5G challenge points that we're putting down here. So clearly, in the context of 5G, to get to the sort of peak rates that we're talking about for 5G systems, smaller cells and higher frequencies are likely to be part of the narrative. That may necessitate a number of more than the typical number of handovers that we have today in our networks. And that could potentially bring some challenges in terms of the latency of the services. So some thinking about some cross-layer thinking in terms of what happens there, how you could deal with, from an application layer, being resilient to these effects. The MIMO antennas is another one that we've put down here, I think principally because we're talking about peak rates, but if there are some aspects of the system or application that need to be cognizant of some of the signaling that's happening in a 4G or 5G system, then to deliver a good, an immersive quality of experience, then that we should take on board that context or that challenge is there, and we'd like to see a narrative coming through on proposals around that. And consumer devices, if we're going to have some smart applications, if there are some special media server or caching, edge computing related techniques, the edge computing could be in the infrastructure within the station context, which can be arranged, or it could be on the train. Now, both of those are possible ways to deploy the system, and we're open to hearing proposals that look at smart ways in terms of content delivery and sort of edge concepts. An important bit, thanks John for the slides to make sure I remember this is really important. We need to see proposals that are at least demonstrating, cognizant and addressing at least one of the challenges from each of those two previous slides. So user experience and technical challenges. So an understanding of, or recognising or acknowledging those 6 challenges that we were listed and picking one from each of those categories. And it really, we're looking for a proposal that's looking around how to maintain a high quality of experience for the users. Now, there's a number of bullet points here, which I'm going to go over each one in turn. They're available to you in the slide deck anyway. But I think what I must emphasize here is, again, 4G to 5G network, understanding that readiness for 5G is a key value proposition. Commercialization timeframe. Let's assume that the project will complete around 31st of March 2021. So within 2 to 3 years of that completion date, something that is viable as a product. Looking to make sure that we are accessing and working within a collaborative way the expertise in the Korean counterparts, and they're very willing to collaborate. They've been very kind to fly over just for this event for today, so there's very clearly a strong signal of a willingness to collaborate and be open, and that's an opportunity we really don't want to miss. How would your consortium effectively manage that working relationship? It's a key question that we'll be looking at. Must be able to, ideally we're looking for a narrative here that shows some strength in a proposition in the UK and how that is extending out now into the context of Korea and more broadly Asia, if you wish. And if you can build on activity, it's a must-have for us that it's activity that's happening in the UK now that we can point to and say, well, we're expanding that out, bringing it out into this UK-Korea collaborative environment. And an awareness, although there's limited scope for this discussion at this stage because there's too many unknowns. But what we do know is that we would like to think about how to extend the application, how to develop and trial it in other environments. So high-speed rail, highways, so vehicle-based infotainment for a car, for example, or a bus, or a train, different speeds of train. All these are environments that we're interested in considering and understanding. Within the form, you'll have the opportunity to talk about benefits. So making sure that there are some better solutions than what are currently available today. So we're looking for an advancement on what's available state of the art today. Moving environment, of course, very important in this context, what the benefits could be in terms of the functional and performance within a moving environment. Algorithms and edge computing, possibilities and enhancements and innovations, very interesting. make sure that it's leveraging the UK's globally recognised strengths. So we've already isolated sort of media and infotainment as an area that we recognise as a strong industrial proposition from the UK. So hopefully from that platform, people are able to project a strength that is globally recognised. And make sure, we're going to, as a benefit, make sure that the UK participants will have access to the Korean hardware and test beds. They'll have access to the test bed. That's an important benefit. Out of scope, so important again to GATE, we're saying we need to see the commercialisation narrative. Proposals that are just within a simulated environment are not of interest. Important that we hear how the engagement with South Korean partners will happen. And we don't want to have too much overlap with existing funded projects. Now, there may well be activities that are coming towards an end that have been part of the original 6 funded projects, or concluding there, that could be drawn on. But if it's continuing to be funded by DCMS or by the Trials and Test Beds programme, may be not so easy to include it in this project. Now, actually, this slide may not be so easy for you at the back to gather what's happening here. But this is really just the first, and again, available in information pack. This is really just slicing the logical architecture into a few layers, just to indicate where we would expect the UK and Korea interfaces to happen. So a human-machine interface area, which is principally UK-based. If there is infrastructure that needs to be fitted to a train, like a display screen or something, that will also be the Korean departments. But in terms of user devices and virtual reality, augmented reality handsets, that would have to come from the UK side. The application layer, again, principally all UK side provision. Middleware, this will be the context depends on how the system comes together hardware and software wise, but we're expecting a fair amount of potentially interaction between UK and Korean partners here. The operation systems layer, there will be separately, principally, we're imagining that the communications infrastructure or the connectivity will be coming, OS, operation system wise and connectivity wise, will be coming from the Korean partners. There may well need to be some general processing platforms, some racks, some PC-based system to support the application server, for example, and that would have to come from the UK side. And there may be some storage and caching, and again, that may well be, if there's some large storage capacity that's required, then the UK side needs to be prepared to bring that to the party. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Simon. And there'll be opportunities for more technology questions, and in fact, I'll be bringing Simon back up here to, we've developed some FAQs, so we think that would be useful to run through those. But just a bit more on the Seoul technology platform, I'd like to introduce to the stage one of our Korean colleagues, Junhwan Lee from the Electronics Technology Research Institute, or ETRI, and you're going to give us a bit more information on the technology platform. So,
you said when we were going to have the opportunity to ask questions.
Yes, in the Q&A session about 11 o'clock. Yeah, okay, thank you. And we'll do that systematically just because we're filming, and so we have a record of it. Yeah. Junhwan, please, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Junhwan Lee from ETRI Korea. Thank you for your kind introduction to me. So I'm very glad to be here with you today and also to participate in this briefing event. And ETRI is a leading organization for this project. So that's why I'm here to explain more about what we have done and what we are prepared till now. And so, so I'm going to deliver a little bit information about for both, technical research aspect and also the POC environment involved with this project. Then let's move on to the my presentation. So it doesn't matter the title here. So we call it the project called MHN. So MHN stands for the Mobile Hotspot Network. So way back into 2012, we have performed this research based on the millimeter wave in high-speed environment, train. So let me introduce about the concept of MHN. I don't need my microphone. It's okay. Okay. So here, this slide shows the concept of MHN. So as I mentioned that the MHN stands for a mobile hotspot network. So MHN actually are targeting for the moving wireless backhaul optimized for train, so P2P environment. So we mainly focusing on the backhaul link in technical sense based on millimeter wave. So inside the vehicle, we can also use Wi-Fi using below 6 gigahertz. Of course, we can also consider femtocells, LTE-based one. And the motivation of this project is to provide ultra high data rate to users on board, even in high-speed environment. That's the main motivation, because before that time, we mostly focusing on just nomadic environments and how we can provide a lot of data to the users. But here in this project, even for the users in onboard in high-speed environment. This is the overall conceptual figure you can see. So it's invisible, this pointer here, but I'm using pointing with my finger, so you can see there, right? Okay, I'm going to also briefly introduce some technical aspect here. So the MHN radio transmission, main features of MHN specification is TDD based one, and the waveform is WebTem based and 2x2 MIMO. It doesn't mean that only 2 elements of antenna. It means 2 panels of antenna. So each panel include a lot arrays of antennas. And then we also consider the modulation level QPSK to 256 QAM and support up to 10 Gbps. Of course, here 10 Gbps we have evaluated in simulation, not in the test bed environment. And also, as you all know, the 5G targeting for the mobility up to 500 kilometers per hour. So we also targeting the value, the requirement value in even in support high 5 kilometers per hour train speed. And also we applied carrier aggregation as well. So you can see some specification. Those specifications are written based on the existing LTE advanced specification. That's why we call MHN is pre-5G technology. So we cannot say exactly this is 5G technology. So this is a little bit more on the technical aspect. So normally in wireless area communication, before doing something, we have to investigate what will happen with we apply certain kind of frequency band. So as I mentioned, we applied millimeter wave in this environment. So we have tried to get some channel modeling based on the ray tracing model. So right-hand side, you can see how we can reconstruct the environment in a subway tunnel. So based on those reconstructed environment, we applied ray tracing. So, and this one is the RX and TX antenna radiation patterns. And as you can see, the parameters here. And the result shows like this. This is one of key parameters, XPD. It's the kind of how we can enhance the data rate by multiplexing the data. Multiple layers by using multiple layers, for example. So here, so depending on the value of cross polarization discrimination, we can see how we can well apply the data multiplexing environment. So as you can see, the larger the value is, the better the multiplexing is. So as you can see, in this high-speed training environment, the line of sight is already occupied. So we can have a higher value of XPD. It means that we can enhance much data rate by using the data multiplexing technology here. This is the simulation result. So this slide shows the MHM performance and data rate. At the time, we assume the bandwidth up to 1 gigahertz bandwidth. And then we assume also the mobility here, 100 to 5 kilometer per hour. And as I mentioned, the XPD, the value of XPD here, 25 dB, is very large. And K factor is how the line of sight is occupied. The K factor implies how we can confident whether the environment is line of sight or not. And all these environments we simulate, and then we got the result there. So as I mentioned that in the previous slide, we targeting for the maximum data rate up to 10 gigabps. So as you can see, we mostly achieve there. So this slide shows the performance. And based on those kind of specification and simulation work, we also have designed the systems for the demonstration as well. So here you can see antenna module configuration, transmitter side and receiver side, and RU means transmitter side attached on the wall around the subway and around the tunnel, subway tunnel, and MT is mounted on the on top of the train. So those antennas are mounted for each, and then at the time the power limitation is maximum transmit power of 20 dBm, and the right-hand side shows the radiation pattern as well, and EIRP requirement in 25 to 26. Here, at the time, we applied this frequency band. At the time, the government allow us to use this band for this test. So we call it a FEX frequency band. So later on, you can see what FEX stands for. So this is the real, developed, equipment for RU and MTE. You can see my colleagues over here working very hard. So because this is real commercial line, so we can use this test site only the time when nobody is no subway is running at the time. So normally early in the morning, 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, like that. So they're doing very hard. And the map shows the subway line map here, shows subway line number 8. So you can see RU 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are the RRH, radio remote unit, is attached on the wall. And then the train is running through around here up to the maximum speed of 80 kilometers per hour, I think. So this is the test environment. See, this is the rear, a subway line 8 tunnel environment. As I mentioned, this shows the MRU here. And then the right-hand side, this shows the SNR value, and this one is throughput based on SNR. So as you can see, the value of the maximum data rate is up to 1.26 gigabps. But by simulation, we have verified we can achieve the 10 gigabps. This is a real test result. So now after this project, we also press release Korea KBS. I don't know whether you guys know about the KBS, Korea Broadcasting System. So we already, announced this, result and make some advertisement. And then ETRI successfully demonstrated MHA system at Seoul Subway Line 8 in February 2017. And the data rate, as I showed you before, 1.25 gigabps was achieved. So now where we are standing. Now we are, targeting for the commercialization. So some, companies already developing some commercial product for, RRH and MT side. And I think, hopefully at the end of this year, they will launch the commercial, services. And they are also did finish it, some benchmark test, 2012. And as I mentioned, FACS stands for Flexible Access Common Spectrum. Flexible Access Common Spectrum. So we call it FACS frequency. That was, given by government, of course. And the frequency band is before 25 to 26 or something. But now the FACS frequency changed to 23.6 gigahertz. And then in that frequency band, we're considering both sides, up and down. We think about the effective frequency band up to 600 megahertz band. Okay, today I have prepared some video clip. Please see the video clip.
MHA는 한국의 대도시에서 운행 중인 지하철에서 사용되고 있는 와이브로 백홀에 비해 1000배 빠른 이동 무선 백홀 시스템을 제공하게 됩니다. 시속 500km의 속도로 달리는 고속철에서도 고품질의 UHD 동영상 서비스나 가상현실 기반의 게임 등을 할 수 있도록 최대 10GBps급 백홀 속도를 제공하게 됩니다. MHA는 5G 이동통신 핵심 기술을 이용하여 구현되며 이를 통해서 지하철이나 고속철 내에서 대용량 데이터 서비스를 가능하게 합니다. 선로 옆에 설치된 MRU와 열차에 탑재된 MTE 간의 밀리미터파를 이용하여 통신하며 고속 이동 시에도 핸드오버가 이루어져 객차 내의 서비스는 끊김없이 계속됩니다. 평창 동계올림픽에서 MHN 이동 무선 백홀 시스템이 제공하는 5G의 다양한 멀티미디어 서비스를 만나보세요. MHN이 제공하는 미래 5G 모바일 환경에서는 언제 어디서나 고품질의 UHD 비디오, 비즈니스, SNS, 온라인 게임, VR, AR 서비스를 즐길 수 있습니다.
Ending with my presentation, I'm going to introduce my two colleagues from Korea for this 15 minutes presentation. Please, would you please stand up and introduce yourself? One by one. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So now, thank you. So I think Junhwan's presentation sort of hints at that narrative that Simon was talking about. The competition, of course, the test environment is the Seoul Metro. with the 1.25, 1.5 gigabits per second. But the whole idea of the competition is to point to 5G technologies to unearth and test new services that could be tested elsewhere in rapid transport environments. So, maybe we look forward to the London to Brighton line. I don't know, London to Manchester. Who can do? What we've tried to do, we're going to take some questions, FAQs in a few minutes, but we've tried to preempt some FAQs which the team here working with the Koreans have already come up with in our head. So Simon's just going to run through these at lightning quick pace, because actually it might answer some of your questions before you ask them. So Simon, I'm just going to ask you to come up and very quickly run through these, maybe even not even talk through them, but
yes, okay.
give a canter through.
I struggle with running quickly through slides, as you may have gathered. So, but anyway, I'll canter through. So yeah, I think the configuration is relatively clear. It's written down in detail. If you're interested in thinking about the system architecture, then we're providing some indications there in terms of specifications and where the interfacing will be between PDN and IP network, and so that's important in terms of thinking about how your application could fit in with the architecture. Typical data rates. Downlink and uplink are slightly different. It's different rates in uplink and downlink, so bear that in mind as well. So the downlink is clearly has more throughput than the uplink here, and it's a .11 Wi-Fi AP as well. Don't plan on there being open access to the internet. This is a capable but private network, though you can add in media servers and the like, but don't assume that there's access to the cloud and over the internet from this network. There is a possibility to enhance it, but for the purposes of this project, don't assume that. Test equipment will not be provided, and there are no QoS guarantees at this stage on that infrastructure that's been provided, what's being described there, but the sort of round trip time, ingress to egress at PDCP layer is roughly 10 milliseconds. So it's quite a relatively low latency network, and it's based on an LTE networking stack. Yes. This is regarding demonstrating commercial viability. We're sort of assuming a TRL 6 to 7 level in terms of the desired readiness of the solution. So you're demonstrating a concept and full qualification for product in 2 to 3 years after this project completes. How many users should the application cater for? Well, we're looking again for scalability. There'll be limited number of friendly users or people who can do the trial in practice. We understand that because that will be a cost dimension. We're not planning to inflict this demonstrator on the general public unless the consortium thinks that's doable. So generally you'll have to recognise there's a limited number of people who can use the application in situ, but we're looking for a scalable solution that can cater for many other users. User application media server. So would it require a media server? If your application requires a media server, can it be accommodated? The answer is yes. The application requires connectivity to the mobile network. Now, the mobile network is connectable to, I believe, in the underground, but assume not for the purposes of this project. We're intending that the principal platform for use for the connectivity is based on going over the millimeter wave backhaul to Wi-Fi within the train, and don't assume mobile connectivity is generally reliably available in that environment. Our application requires use for specialist AR and VR user equipment. This can be accommodated and we're quite happy to see it. Of course, bear in mind again the narrative around 2 to 3 years to commercialization. If your application requires everyone to be sitting in virtual reality headsets on a commuter train, not going to happen. The application requires user locally generated content. Now, actually, we're in the constraints of a subway, so maybe there's limited scope for interesting contents there. Nevertheless, yes, certainly user or locally generated video content can be part of the trial activity, but it would be useful to understand what requirements there may be there. Again, application, so we have our own media content. Can that be accommodated? Certainly. You'll need to provide a media server or located within the trials environments. Any applications, now we're not looking, of course we see a vision there from Korean counterparts talking about high-speed train, but we're not constrained necessarily only to train in terms of the application. So yes, an application that isn't totally fitting a train environment is also acceptable, but it's important that it's taking into account the mobility of a vehicle requirement at least.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Stay there because I think we're now going to have time for Q&A. If you could just stay there,
Okay.
and I'll come over here. Please, after the break, I'll be talking about eligibility in the application process. So if you could keep your questions in this session onto the scope, that would be very helpful. We might have to get our head around questions, so give us a few moments to process them, and we might have to call on several different people to answer the question. If you're online, please, I think there may be some questions from online, Andy, yeah. Also, please make sure there's a question mark at the end of your question. Some of you will want to talk about 5G and different opinions. Please, we welcome that, but welcome that in the break and networking session. So we want to keep this as relevant to the scope as we possibly can, please. So I think if you'd like to just wait for the mic to come to you, sir, there's a couple of questions on this side, Andy. And if you could also, sir, say your name and which organisation you're from. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation, particularly Simon, the scoping. My name is Mehrdad Diyanati. I'm a professor of connected autonomous vehicles from University of Warwick Manufacturing Group. A very short question, if Simon is not too specific. I was wondering, when you were scoping the call, did you have a sort of perfect example of because the way that it is scoped, it seems to me, and looking at the budget, etc., you are looking for perhaps someone who has infrastructure, someone who has the application, sort of, you know.
Well, I think the infrastructure requirement is limited, but ultimately it's user devices, and if some media content or some edge capability is necessary, that principally is sitting in the application layer and not going down into the networking, because of course the networking layer is sort of separated in quite carefully here, so we don't get too much cross-layer innovation. But so the infrastructure is limited from the UK side in terms of what needs to be brought to the party. You know, it's a compute capability. I believe there's 19-inch racks available, or PC servers can be brought across, and so it's more about the user equipment, which, you know, could simply be a smartphone, or it could be some headset or augmented reality capability. So that's all necessary.
Thank you. No clues. This gentleman here on the side, Andy, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon Pike. I'm currently independent, but previously worked for DCMS on the ill-fated Transpennine Initiative project, which addressed many of the same issues. So I've got two very different questions. The first one is that an integral part of infotainment is content. and content is language specific and culturally dependent. And therefore the question is, who is responsible for providing the content and the rights to it, which is equally important for the user trial. The second question is from experience that any equipment such as a media server installed on any railway carriage is subject to certification requirements which are substantially more stringent than for typical telecoms applications. So will information on on that be made available in the time frame of the call so that people are able to take into account what might be needed in order to use that part of the project? Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
For the content, it will all come from the UK side. Any rights about if it can only be consumed within the UK and can't be consumed overseas, then that needs to be addressed by the consortium. So content ownership in the infotainment application is all the responsibility of the UK side. So yes, if there are issues with how those rights need to be managed overseas, then they need to be clear. You know, that needs to be considered by the consortium.
And producing it in Korean language?
It doesn't have to be in Korean language. So I think that's where there's an element of, you know, this is still a trials activity. So the final 2 to 3 years of productization of the solution could well be about localizing the content to make it more digestible for the Korean culture, for example, if that's the way that the application proposition develops. So that isn't a mandatory aspect here to do that full customization for Korean market at this stage. I think there's an element of trust that could be part of the productization process in the following years.
I think as well, UK content does go around the world.
Yeah.
So games, music, TV does actually travel in some cases, but I mean with some amendments. So.
But indexes don't. I think more about the indexes to things like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Simon, your
what was the second question again?
The second question was about the certification of equipment for deployment
Yes.
onto
Okay.
railway.
So, Junhwan, you may need to just jump in if I say something incorrect. But my understanding is, if you saw from that subway train, there was a rack in the corner that was allowed to be on the train for the purposes of these trials, and I don't believe there are any particular specific requirements that hoops we would need to jump through for the purposes of this trial. So on the assumption that we're just, the UK partners are having a general purpose media server capable platform that could be compatible with the rack or could be a PC that sits on top of the rack, that's okay within the utilization or the usage rules of that trials environment. It is a trials environment, is recognised as such.
Could you then confirm, is this a train, it's one carriage, but is it a train that is operational, or is it a train that's only running out of hours without any other
So
passengers?
for this particular, so I think my understanding is that it could be that the trial is carried out while there are passengers on the train, but generally not. There is the possibility with the agreement with the rail operating company underground, sort of subway, that it would generally be out of hours, so it would be outside commuter hours where it would be trialing. There may be the possibility. Yeah.
For the preparation, we have.
Can we just swap?
Oh,
the mic
so
over?
just.
Thank you.
For the preparation, we have to prepare, not in the commuting time. However, if we do some real POC test, we can do some, real, commuting time.
Okay, so that's good. So
That's
there
my
is a
point.
possibility of commuters.
So there, that in the UK, very explicitly.
Sorry, until you have a mic.
All comments are off record until the mic.
Thank you.
So in the UK, if equipment is installed on a train, even in a rack, 19-inch rack, and that train is operating with passengers, then the equipment would need to be certified. That's why I'm asking that.
Sure.
That is very important to know. Otherwise, people could get into very great difficulties.
Okay, thanks, Simon.
Thank you.
There was a question. Well, there's one at the back, but perhaps we take your question here, sir, because the microphone's a bit nearer. Thank you. And then we'll come back to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Sven Koster from Go Media. This is a question related to the network. You were saying it's not an open network, but could it be connected to public service bodies such as the police?
Yeah, could it be connected to the police?
I don't think so.
I think that's a quick no. Yeah. Okay. Question at the back, Andy. Ash, do you want to give it to that? Yeah.
My name is Dr. Rajan Chadha from IBN. I've got a simple question because transport is prone to disruption and prone to disasters. So is this experimentation we are doing will include some kind of advanced warning for disruption or when you need the contents the most? Supposing there's a disturbance or a disaster, everybody needs contents all the time. So is some kind of predictive techniques being tried or something to do with the disaster management and business continuity being addressed?
I think that would be in scope. So within the scope of infotainment, one of the aspects that we put on the notes was to say, though, this could be about helping people move around an environment. Now, it could be going about their day-to-day business, or it could be because there's an emergency and you need them to evacuate. So that's a scenario that could be within the scope, for sure, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Over there. There are two over that side, Andy.
Yeah, okay. So you do the back and ETRI will do the front.
Hi, Paul Dart from NCC Group. Is there scope for integrating with other systems on the rolling stock, such as CCTV or other sensors?
But
anyhow, infotainment. In this project, we are focusing on infotainment. As you point out.
Sorry, Junhwan, if you could just.
We just need to.
Again?
Yeah, please for the record, yeah.
Okay, that's also good application, but in this joint project, we are only focusing on infotainment service like AR and VR, something like that.
Thank you. Why don't you hold the mic? And there's another question. Sir, your name and organisation, please.
Con Crawford, 5G Northeast. I just wanted to ask about Line 8 and the average journey time and the number of MRUs that are available on the line. So can you give us some information?
So as I mentioned, we installed five RU units, right? And then the total long is 5 minutes long. So how we can demonstrate in the site for 5 minutes long. So depending on how we set up the scenarios as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Chat with the mic.
Sorry, just to jump in there to say, although that particular environment is a 5-minute scenario, because that's the run time and there's a particular speed that we can run through the tunnels at, it doesn't mean that the user experience must be constrained to 5 minutes. If it takes a bit longer, then we just say, well, we're just trialing part of the experience, whatever the experience is. So that for this particular context, that's the case, but don't let that limit your imagination in terms of the possible immersive experience or infotainment experience.
Thank you, Simon. That's what I intend to say.
Thank you. Sorry, with the mic.
Janke Vleugel, Planet Computers. Just a question about the Wi-Fi in the actual carriages. So we were told that the overall bandwidth is 1.25 gigabits per second. We can assume that speed. How does that translate to the Wi-Fi? So we're assuming the devices will be Wi-Fi only. That's one question. The second question is, how would that bandwidth be apportioned to each traveler?
Yeah, I'm gonna hand that
Junhwan,
over to.
So in current Wi-Fi, Ethernet can provide those kind of capacity, so it doesn't matter, I think. You understand that?
But it may well be
the bandwidth?
Yes.
May
But what we are focusing on is the bandwidth in backhaul link, not in the Wi-Fi area.
I understand, but if there's something in the if there's something in the actual service,
yes,
that depends if the uplink and the downlink are. Sorry, if there's something in the service that there's an uplink and a downlink requirement for the quality of service, the quality of experience, right? Could we say that so many people are using the service, so certain services will still be within scope, certain services will be out of scope. So
Simon, do you want to jump in?
Yeah,
there's like a bandwidth per customer.
The short answer to that is it's in scope to make it clear in your technical proposal how you would like to address that in the space that's available on the form, and that will be taken into account. So it's a fairly standard Wi-Fi system, but there because it's a trials environment, if there are particular bandwidth requirements on uplink or downlink, then there may be ways to configure the Wi-Fi AP so that we can simulate or emulate a particular utilization of that Wi-Fi system.
So just a question, continuation on that point. If there's a concept of slicing within the 5G side, so if you're talking about broadcast versus ultra-low latency, if we're talking about gaming, for example, where we want ultra-low latency, or broadcast where we want, I don't know, news being broadcast or something else. So are we allowed to, tinker with the slicing on the capacity that we have?
Junhwan.
Actually, in backhaul link, we don't care which services are there. We're just only concerned about the capacity data rate. So what you mentioned is very related to the network side, depending on what kind of services would be accommodated in this test environment. So anyhow, it's a good point about not the area to cover in this time.
But I think, to Simon's point, that you should put in your application what you feel the optimal requirements should be, because I think that would be helpful first for judging the application, but also, if you're successful, then talking to our partners in Korea.
Yeah, I think we did explore this area, but whether it's not a slicing capable platform that we have here, end-to-end slicing as you and I would know it in terms of the desires for where 5G will eventually go. But because it's a controlled private network, we have the possibility potentially to configure some channels in a static way to emulate something potentially. So I would say if there are requirements there, and we can certainly I've seen on other projects, there are ways to relatively statically configure. So not looking at dynamic configuration of slices, we're not going to get that sort of environment here, but something where we can emulate some different slicing for some different services and set up something that's in the Wi-Fi and also in the application layer, so we can see different sockets. So it looks like there's a slicing-like mechanism to the application. Then that's should be doable within the construct of this system.
Thanks, Simon. So you've been waiting for a while. So
John Cosmas from Brunel University and Internet of Radio-like project, European project. Would there be an interest in replacing the wireless LAN in the trains with a 5G network instead, so that you do have the capabilities of slicing and that you do have the capabilities of an edge NFV SDN network between the interface of the train RAN and the backhaul?
It's not within scope to change too much of the configuration on the train, is the answer to that. Until I know exactly what you're proposing, it's difficult to make a clear answer to that. But obviously, generally, we're trying to stick within the constraints of having now a Wi-Fi based connectivity. If it's possible, if your proposal says just by unplugging this Wi-Fi box and putting this box in its place, we're able to provide the capability that we need, maybe possible. but that would need a little bit further discussion with our career counterparts to see if we can just swap out a standard Wi-Fi box and put in some other solution to allow for that connectivity to the end user devices.
So I'm going to take 2 more questions and then we're going to break. So your question.
Ollie Robertson, independent. Following on from that question, clearly intense Wi-Fi in a closed space has many opportunities. Would testing a Faraday cage hijab be within scope, in that the radiation next to these transmitters could be health hazard? Is there any consideration within the scope of these issues?
There's no intention to explore health and safety issues related to this connectivity.
Okay, thank you. Bob, you have a question?
Bob Driver, UK 5G. Simple question, really.
Yeah.
When do applications have to be in by?
Oh, well, I'll be covering that later, the 1st of June at noon, Bob. Yeah. Right.
I've got 2 questions from online.
Okay, we're going to do that and then go to break. But look, we'll be around at break and for the rest of the day.
So I have a technical question and a project-led question. Technical question is from Iqbal Bedi, who says, it seems like the infrastructure is being provided by the South Korean partners.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that you don't expect small cell providers to be part of a consortium?
Yes, is the, well, okay. I mean, it's, as I said, with the proviso that if there's a plug and play replacement of a Wi-Fi access point for another one that provides some edge intelligence in a Wi-Fi, it looks like a Wi-Fi box that could sit on the train, it may be possible to do that. That would need a little bit of further discussion, but it would have to be pretty much a seamless integration. So,
Okay. Could I just?
Could be.
I mean, we'll come on to this later, but there isn't a company or a type of company which is excluded. They may not be doing their core business, but they may be useful in some other way to help with the rest of the project. So there's no exclusions with regards to...
Yeah, don't forget that there were 3 key technical points that were quite, I mean, it may well be that the capability to address those networking-based questions that we had in terms of how does this evolve to be, you know, this application layer innovation, this infotainment related, is cognizant, or the consortium has the capability, is cognizant of how to do the 5G readiness. And it may well be that a small cell player has in-house the capability to address those questions. That's quite possible.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, what is the support available in terms of finding a partner in Korea? And that's from Mohammed Raja.
Well, so shall I come to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the partner in Korea is Junhwan and his team at ETRI. So the Korean partners have already been established, and they're great guys and very easy to work with. This competition, as we'll go through, is to select the UK consortium, and the winning UK consortium, based on their application, will then be teamed up with ETRI in order to undertake the R&D. So, so that's how it works. Great. Thank you. We're running a bit late. We're 15 minutes behind schedule. I'm going to break us now for 15 minutes, and we'll call you back in at 11:45. And then I do hope you can stay, because I'll be running through the application process and all of the forms and all of the questions. So please, thanks very much, and thanks for all our speakers today. Thank you very much. This section of the agenda will be running through the application, eligibility and application process. There are a lot of slides, because we're giving you chapter and verse on the application process. And at the end of the presentation, there'll be time for a Q&A. We're hoping to have lunch at 12:45, which is 15 minutes later than the time on the agenda, but that should give you plenty of time for questions. I'm not going to run through and say all of the words that appear on the slides, but all of the words that appear on the slides are already online, and if you have any questions about them, we'll be giving you an email address by which to direct your questions if you have them after today. So, eligibility, the competition is already open, and I'll come on to dates, etc. a bit later. The competition's been open since last Saturday, and the deadline is the 1st of June at noon. Okay. So there's not a lot of time, but eligibility, we're looking to get projects started by 1st of August. So if you're successful and we're planning a summer holiday, think about that timing. We want applicants to be a consortium, so we won't accept any single company applications. Okay, this is a collaborative piece of R&D. And applications in the application process need to be submitted by the lead applicant. Okay, and we've worked very hard to try to make all of the different various forms as user-friendly as they possibly can be. There are some reasons for some of the forms, and we'll come on to why a bit later, but we've tried to help streamline the process. So if you are the lead applicant, then we expect you to submit the forms. If you're working with a lead applicant in the a lead company or lead organisation in the consortium, then you need to tell them that it's on them to upload all of the forms in the application process. And projects must involve at least one micro, small or medium-sized enterprise. So if you're a large company thinking about who you might be collaborating with, you are obliged to work with a micro, small or medium-sized enterprise. So to lead a project, you must be a UK-based business. You can be a wholly owned consortium from a non-UK based business, but you must be UK-based. You must carry at least some of the project work out in the UK. I think what that means is that if you're successful in the application, we don't expect all of your project work to be done in Korea. Okay, so at least some of the work has to be done in the UK. We think this is a really great opportunity, this project, to develop some new IP, and we want you to exploit the results in the UK, to UK markets or from the UK. And the DCMS 5G programme has a programme participation agreement. And that's not a big deal, but it's an agreement to basically share some of the lessons and learnings. There's a copy of it online, so you can read it full chapter and verse, but broadly speaking, it's to encourage sharing of the lessons and learnings. It doesn't affect any IP ownership, so you're not giving up any of your IP by being successful with this project. If you're not the lead organisation, but you're a collaborator, you need to be a UK-based business or an academic organisation or charity or public sector organisation, third sector, or research and technology organisation. If you're wondering whether you're a research and technology organisation, if you don't know that you are, you're not one, because generally they have a very special status. So this project, we're happy to work with that very broad range of organisations. Again, we would want you to carry out some of your project work in the UK and be able to intend to exploit the results from or in the UK and sign up to the project participation agreements. Now, you can be an organisation and a project partner that doesn't receive funding. So what the grant funding won't pay for is, for example, non-UK businesses. And your contribution to the project, you might want to work on it not just for the benefit of grant funding, you might want to work on it for the opportunity and kudos of working on a project with the Koreans, for example. Your costs in your application process will count towards the total programme costs for the purposes of that £1 million minimum project cost threshold, but you won't get some funding. Okay. And that's because quite often we do have foreign companies, for example, who want to come onto the programme, bring expertise. That's absolutely fine. It's just there's no DCMS grant funding available. You can submit multiple applications, Not many of them, because remember, there's going to be one winner, one winning consortium, but any one business can lead on one application and collaborate on a further 2 applications. Okay, so if you want to make friends here or elsewhere and submit more than one application, you can do so. Again, if a business is not leading an application, it can be a collaborator on up to 2. But an academic institution or a research training organisation can't lead on an application. This has to be business-led, but it can be a collaborator on up to 2 different applications. So if you're a catapult, for example, then you can't lead, but you can be a collaborator on 2 applications. If you're a university, you can't lead, but you can be in 2 applications. Okay. This is the bit I've got to say, because actually this competition is subject to state aid. So any UK business claiming funding has to be eligible to receive state aid at the time that you're awarded funding, and thereafter follow eligibility requirements for state aid. And I'm sure Jacob, if you ask him, can give you chapter and verse as to why that has to be the case. But at the moment, we need you to be compliant with state aid. There is a link to online guidance for that in the competition guidance. So if you're unsure, again, chapter and verse is online. So funding. The grant funding available for this project is up to £1.2 million worth to fund a single consortium. Okay. Simon said earlier about that £1 million, and I should just try perhaps to separate the 2 things. We're looking for minimum project scale to be £1 million, and that can be all of the partners spending their money on the total size of the project. And that's because the DCMS want a project of a certain scale. But the amount of grant funding that's available is just 1.2 million. So that might mean that the project costs £10 million or £5 million, and you might want to bring some of your own resources into that project, you know, for the kudos of working on this project or with the Koreans or internationally or testing on the Seoul Metro and beyond. But the total project funding that's available is only 1.2 million. Okay, so the grant money is the grant money, and then the minimum project. There's no maximum project cost for the project. Okay, and because this falls under experimental development, which involves collaboration, we are able to give you a certain amount of your project costs, and this is project costs per partner. So if you're a small business, this project, the grant fund will fund you up to 60%. If you're a medium-sized business, 50%. If you're a large business, 40%. And if you're unsure as to which category you fall into, again, the online competition details can give you guidance on that, but most businesses know what category that they fall under. Okay, so for SMEs, up to 60% of your project costs. If you're a research technology organisation and as well a university or an academic organisation, this kind of follows the Innovate UK funding model. You can share up to 30% of the total eligible costs. So you will be very familiar with that if you're a university used to applying for funding. Okay. And if your consortium has 2 universities in it or 2 organisations that fall under this, the limit for all of those organisations is 30%. So I think if that's you, you probably will be familiar with this format. I've mentioned this, so I won't do it again, but a copy of that is online for you to have a look at. If you've got questions about eligibility, we've set up a single email address, which is korea@uk5g.org. We have people manning that every working day, and some of us will be looking at it at weekends as well. So if you have questions, given the short nature of the of the competition timeframe, 1st of June at noon, we'll be looking at this every day, and we'll respond to your questions, hopefully, touch wood, within 24 hours. So we're aiming to beat Innovate UK on their responsiveness, which I think is 3 days of responsiveness. But we look at this every day. Date, so the competition opened last week. Today's the briefing event. 1st of June at noon is when the competition closes. I'm really sorry, but 1 minute past noon doesn't cut it, because we think this competition will be highly competitive, because there can only be one winner. We're going to stick to the rules. If there is any problem, please try and upload your application at least a couple of days before, or not on the morning of the 1st of June. That would be very helpful for us, because then if you do have a problem, you can email that address and we'll try and resolve your problem as quickly as possible. But applications received after noon won't be eligible. So as a lead applicant, you'll be responsible for collating all of the information, and you'll be representing your organisation in leading the project. And that means, I think, Jacob, the grant money will flow through the lead partner. That's correct, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So what we'll ask you, and the application is, moving on to the application process and the form, we've divided the application into 4 sections. A form, which is the application details. There are 10 application questions, which are part of an online form. We want some financial information from you, and there's an Excel spreadsheet that we'll be asking you to submit. We also have provided a draft copy of the DCMS grant agreement. Now, we're not expecting winning consortia to stray at all, or at least too far from that draft agreement, but we've provided that for you for your information when you're putting the application together. And documents to be submitted, the project application form, and there are some allowed appendices in those questions. The finance form, which we need all partners to have signed. So if you're a lead partner in the consortium, you need to gather people together and get that signed. Project participation form, and that's 1 per project partner, and that's for the state aid requirements. And for each project partner, the DCMS are also asking for a PDF copy of your latest accounts. So every project partner is asked for your latest accounts. And that's where we're a bit different on this one from Innovate UK. So this here is a screen grab of the page where you upload the answers to your questions. What we've tried to do, because there are a lot of documents that we ask you to upload, is we've provided a checklist. We've also set up a secure and encrypted document transfer system for you. So everything is 100% secure, as much as anything is 100% secure. We've also created a separate email address for you to send appendices, etc. to. So that's separate from the career queries email address. It's 5G Infotainment at uk5g.org. So please don't send your questions there, but send your applications there, and send your questions to the career address, but don't send your applications there, please. So I'm just going to go through the application itself, because I think people find it handy. Section 1 in the application form is your details, some applicant information, a project summary, and we use your project summary to assign experts to assess the application. Okay, we're expecting that every single application will be assessed by 3 to 5 assessors who are experts in their field, and we have a pool of assessors And this project summary is a very helpful way for us to be able to direct your application towards the assessors. We ask you for a public description, and that will be the public description that will be used in the press release and online should your application be successful. Okay, and then finally in this section we ask you to describe how this project meets the scope of the application. Okay, and the scope of this section will be used to determine whether your project is in scope or not in scope. Okay, so it's very important that you refer to the scope of the competition and you explain how how your application meets that scope. There are some word limits on each of these, 400 words. We ask you to describe your project as clearly as you can. Often it's this section which is the first thing that assessors see. So if you're able to clearly describe your project, what it's attempting to test, what the purposes are, what's the scope, then that gives you a really excellent head start when assessors come to look at the questions. So please work on this and get the best possible start for your application. So section 2 is the application questions. I've talked about assessors. Each question is worth up to 10 points, and we add up the 10 questions and they come to 100 and it gives us a percentage. Okay, there is, depending on, this is a competitive process, but there is also a quality threshold. So the assessors will come together and talk about the appropriate quality threshold by which then shortlisted applications then get judged. Okay. So I think that's all quite straightforward. And for any of you who have applied to Innovate UK funding, these next 10 questions will be really familiar because these 10 questions have been tried and tested over the last kind of 10 years with public funding organisations. So when we worked with the DCMS to think about what the questions ought to be, actually we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I think there's a few minor tweaks here and there, but broadly speaking, they should be pretty familiar for you if you've applied for Innovate UK funding before. What's the need or challenge? I'm not going to go through all of these, but again, all of these are online. So we're asking you to describe these in your project. That's question 1. Question 2, what's your approach towards the innovation? So this is where assessors will understand what's currently state of the art and how you're being innovative or not. Most assessors, I think, hope that projects they're assessing are actually innovative, but being able to explain what the current state of the art is and how your project goes beyond it, I think is very helpful. And that's to that point in here. There is an appendix for this answer. So we ask for that to be PDF, up to 2 pages long, and not larger than 10 megabits, please. Megabytes, yeah. Team and resources. Who's in the project team? What are their roles? If you're organising your application in work packages, you'll be asked to describe those later on in the application, but you might want to explain how the members in your team relate to the particular work packages that the project will undertake. It's okay if you have gaps in your team, as long as you sort of describe where they are and what your plan is for recruiting should your project be successful, that's absolutely fine. Okay. And there's an appendix available to support your application here. You know, if you want to add CVs, etc., or relevant experience for members of the team, please feel free to do that. Market awareness. What does the market you're targeting look like? So, you know, because this is a collaboration with the Koreans, you might want to go and ask them over lunch about the size of the South Korean market. But actually, because this is heralding a narrative towards 5G deployment, you know, with a commercialization targeted for 2 to 3 years, you might have other potential target markets that you want to address, UK or other international markets. So this question asks you to think really carefully about the addressable market for your particular project. And if you can add in relevance about the UK position, competitors in your space, for example, that would be very helpful. And how your projects will try to explore the market's potential, okay? There's also a question about, which is the next question, which is about outcomes and route to market. And again, to Simon's, I think we've got one more bullet, yeah. To Simon's point, because a requirement, the scope of this project is thinking about commercialization, I think this is a really important question. You don't need to have all of the answers yet, because we know that markets are forming and emerging at the moment, but I think we'd like to see something in your application. You know, there are 10 points available here for scoring as to how you'll explain your take from what you're hoping to do for this project and commercialize it. Oh, there's another one. Ah, yes, I missed this is the place to put your strategy, tactics towards IP. Yeah. We have a question for wider impacts, which is that there might be some social or environmental benefits to undertaking your project. There might be some health benefits. There might be some policy impacts. One would expect the DCMS to be keenly interested in this project because it's funding it, but that might have a knock-on effect into its ongoing 5G policy and where it puts its money in future, for example. But this is designed to capture environmental and social, societal benefits as well. Oh, I've missed a few there. So, so there are some positive or negative benefits there. Lots of bullets. Project management. This section, normally we want to see how you're going to chunk up your application, the steps, perhaps different work packages, and how you plan to manage the project effectively. This is your best endeavours, because we recognise that you'll be working with colleagues from Korea. So, you know, we want to really see your methodology for collaboration, as well as how you plan to break up the research and development and innovation into chunks. So unsurprisingly, your approach towards engaging with our project partners is key. The main work packages of the project, we'd like to hear from you about what project management methodology you're willing to approach, and the management reporting lines. Okay, and you can submit a Gantt chart as an appendix for one of this for this particular question. Question number 8 is risks. So we really want to hear from you about what the various different risks and uncertainties are in the project. If possible, be as exhaustive as you can be. I generally recommend to applicants to spend 20-30 minutes doing a brainstorm, to just put up post-its on the wall to try and capture as many risks as possible. Really bad applications for innovation funding tend to pretend that there are no risks in the project. Well, actually, because this is R&D, we do want to see some risks, and we want you to have thought about them carefully. So this is a section for you to put that information in, and how you mitigate them, and importantly, how you manage the risk process as you deliver the project, because that's as key in many of the ways as the risks emerge, as from trying to second guess them at the beginning of the project. We let you submit a risk register to support the answer, PDF format as well. So we're quite generous with the amount of space that we give you to outline all of the risks. We'd like to hear what added value this brings to your business or organisation. So explain to us why we might be accelerating your technology roadmap, why we might be building on public research, for example, why we might be helping to inject your business or create new markets for your business. All of that stuff goes in there, why you want the money and why it will be helpful for you. And then finally, costs and value for money. So this is a section that is a text section which will augment the Excel spreadsheet that we'll ask you to complete later on. But basically, it's a summary of what the total project costs are, how much you're requesting, how partners will contribute to their, will fund their contribution to the bits that the grant funding doesn't fund, how this is value for money for the taxpayer, and the assessors that we're lining up to score the applications, they kind of, we're recruiting them on the basis that they know their costs inside out. So please be realistic with the costs that you put in the application. And also, if you have subcontractor costs, this is the place to put them in. And those might be companies that you might be spending some of the project costs on, but are not grant partners or collaborators. So we'd like to hear from you in that session. And then section 3 is the Excel financial information. We need you to use the form provided. It's quite a complicated form, and I'll show you a screenshot of it in a minute. But each organisation needs to complete their particular sheet in the project cost template, and then the lead partner is responsible for checking the details before submitting the form. For those of you at the back, here's a copy of the form. It's available online, both on uk5g.org, but also on the gov.uk website. We've worked very hard with DCMS colleagues to make it as foolproof as possible. There are cells that you're unable to complete because we don't want the information. The format is locked down, we think, so that it will make it very difficult for people to go off-piste. But if you do have any questions about the form, just drop us an email at career@uk5g.org. And then, as I've said, on the grant agreement, we've published a copy of this online just so that you can familiarise yourself with it. We want you to acknowledge that you've read the draft grant agreement when you apply. The DCMS are not absolutely saying that this is the grant agreement that they will get you to sign, because actually the project specifics might not warrant being exactly tied down to that grant agreement, but it is a really good indication of the sort of agreement that, if you're successful, they'll ask you to sign. Okay, so if you think there are some major issues with it, what we don't want you to do, what we don't want to happen is for that to absolutely affect your application. Okay, but what we do want you to do in the application process is to point out where there might be areas where you might have a problem with it, and that will be very helpful for us to get our heads around what the final grant agreement will be. Okay, so there's some supporting information. The competition is already live. If you Google 5G entertainment, you'll probably get it quicker than typing in this very user-friendly link. More information about UK Test Beds and Trials programme. Louise was outlining that, is also online. If you're looking for UK-based project collaborators, you can contact us at the Knowledge Transfer Network, and colleagues in the room from KTM, would you just put your hand up, please? So at the back, there's Andy Curtis, and there's Richard Foggy in the middle there. We're quite happy to help you find UK collaborators. And if you need more information, or if you have a question after looking at all of the information, please email us at career@uk5g.org. Our first question is going to be, have you read the competition documentation first? Because we get an awful lot of queries from people who haven't bothered to read the application. So we're going to ask you to read the documentation first, but after that, we're very happy to help with any queries that you have. Okay, I'm just going to check for timing. Right, so I think we have kind of 15 minutes for Q&As. Andy, you've got the mic. I think because we are still recording, if you could wait for the mic to come to you, and if I need to call on Jacob down the front, Jacob, if you'd like to come up and speak from the lectern, and I'm mic'd up already, so yeah, why don't you come up anyway?
Got a question?
Hi.
I'm John Cosmas from Brunel University and the Internet of Radio Light Project, EU. If the UK supplies any equipment to the Koreans at the end of the project, who owns it? Can we take it all back again? Or do the Koreans want the equipment? You see what I'm saying?
It's a great question, John. And if your consortium is successful in winning the grant, I think one of the first things that the DCMS grant team will ask you to do is to prepare and sign a collaboration agreement with our Korean partners. And those collaboration agreements will be subject to, negotiation. Does that answer your question? Not really. Okay, how about, let me have another go at it. We're not prescriptive in the project. So you basically, you tell us how you think it would work. Does that answer your question?
Well, it's a problem because these projects build a demonstrator, and then at the end of the project, everybody wants to get their equipment about, and so the demonstrator only is alive till the end of the project.
Yeah.
It can't be, if you like, demonstrated beyond it or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think if you want your equipment back, then that's agreeing that with the Korean partners. Yeah.
The question here.
Hi, John. Janko Vlogel, Planet Computers again. Just a quick clarification on the arithmetic and the funds. So there's been there's a statement that the DCMS will provide up to £1.2 million of funding.
Yeah.
And then there was a statement that a project overall value should be around £1 million. So to me, the project value should be around £2.4 million just by using arithmetic. So just a clarification on that, please.
Yeah, I never was great at maths. It's the minimum project value is £1 million project costs. And of course, if you're a large company, then you can, then the grant available, if you're a consortium of large companies being given a grant at 40% because of state aid regulations, you're doing a project that costs £1 million, you're not going to be able to pull down all of that 1.2 million. Okay, so the minimum project level, because we want projects at scale, the total project costs are at least 1 million. Does that clear things up a bit?
Thank you for that. Yeah, but basically, if somebody was to utilize all the funding, it would be around 2.4, right? That would. And a question: there's no consideration for it. It will be one project, not two projects. It will not be two projects. Right?
One lead. There's only one lead winning consortium. So yeah. And of course, in your head you're working out what the values are, but it sort of depends on what the size of the companies in the consortium are, because it can go up to 60% or 40%, So it depends on the collaborators.
And something else I'll be clear on is that the state aid ratios are a legal maximum, not a target. And as John said, if you want to do work with, say, foreign companies that aren't claiming funding, or you think this is a great opportunity and you want to do stuff, but the grant funding, the ratios won't work out at the 40% cap, there's nothing to stop you doing work beyond that. That's just the amount the DCMS are legally allowed to give.
Thanks, Yanko. Any other questions? Hi, sir.
Hello, I'm James from Solid UK. When I see the previous session, actually, when you specify the type of equipment, actually, in the train, it was Wi-Fi actually.
Yeah.
So it's actually said that they may use a millimeter wave with backwards or something like. So, which means that it's named it 5G, but you're not really carrying the things through the 5G spectrums. So it's really confusing actually. Is it? How, so you are looking for some solution maybe for commercial stages, 5G spectrums? So I mean, because
well, I think it nods towards 5G services. So the platform available, in the Seoul Metro will be Wi-Fi, but the competition aims to test services which in future will be available for 5G. Does that help?
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, I thought that actually you guys using the testbed in the Seoul Metro is because South Korea they already utilize commercialize 5G. So it's more suitable for the so it's a testbed for 5Gs. So but you guys is using the Wi-Fi in the train actually. So it's 5G. Where's the sense actually? I'm just confused.
Yeah. Do you want to pass to Junhwan?
Don't be confused. So we can divide two parts, outside and inside. So we are mainly focusing on the outside by using the pre-5G technology. And in terms of service application, we can also consider, if we consider what would be the 5G killer application. So here in this project, we set the 5G application will be VR, AR for 5G. Then also in terms of 5G application, we can consider this is 5G addressed in this project. So technical sense, we are focusing on by using pre-5G in outside backward link. Inside, we don't preclude any technology, Wi-Fi or FEM2 whatever. If you have a solution by using the 5G FEM2 technology, then you can apply.
But I think the way of looking at this, right, is it's up to 1.5 gigabits per second on an underground with very low latency. So those are some of the characteristics of future 5G, and we'd like to test what some of those services are. Go ahead. Are we going back to technology again or the application?
Don't fear. A question about commercialization, if I may. It's Colin Crawford from 5G Northeast. ETRI is separate from, as I understand it, the public-private partnership that runs the Seoul Metro. So I'm interested in understanding the commercial relationship that might exist between ETRI, the public-private partnership, and the winning consortium.
Yeah, well, Junhwan, would you like to answer that question, which is what's the relationship between ETRI and the Seoul Metro?
As I mentioned before in my presentation, we have already kind of some cooperation with Seoul Metro for our previous project. So in ETRI side, we do not focusing on the commercialization. And in this, during our joint project, we are mainly focusing on the R&D aspect. And UK side, you mentioned that this project must be commercialized after 2 years or 3 years after this project. So anyhow, this joint project include research and commercialization. So in ETRI side, we don't have any connection with Seoul Metro in terms of commercialization. Just based on the previous experience with those guys, then this can be a good test bed for further research and some commercialization as well.
And formally, there are collaboration agreements in place between
sure.
ETRI and Seoul Metro. DCMS's confirmation of those collaboration agreements, and that's why we're able to say that we expect that any IP that's developed on the UK side, subject to a collaboration agreement with ETRI, would be respected.
Can I just check, though, in terms of there is no intent for Seoul Metro to actually contract for this solution? There's no tender envisaged. There's no replacement system. There's nothing in place at that moment.
No.
Yeah. Thank you.
A question down here. It was Simon, wasn't it? Yeah.
Thank you. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the minimum budgeted project cost is £1 million, but payment will be made on the basis of work undertaken and the cost of that. So if the project turned out to be capable of being completed in less time and cost than was budgeted for, then the total amount reimbursed would be less than 1 million, but I assume there would be no penalty if that was the case.
Yeah, that's not below time and below cost is not an issue. It's just to give a sense of scale of the projects we're looking for.
And I think you raise a really important point, which is on what basis is the grant paid out to people, Jacob?
So from a practical point of view, grants paid in arrears on actuals. This is not a fixed price contract.
And that's looking at payroll and expense out and things like that.
Overheads, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any questions online? There's one from John here.
John Cosmas again. To what extent can we collaborate with our Korean potential partners in the development of our proposal?
It's a really good question.
Yeah. Because they might get inundated by a lot of different. And they'll have split loyalties, if you like.
Yeah.
With a lot of different groups approaching them, something like that.
It's a really good question, John. So they're here today for you to have a chat with them, to provide you with technical information, not to form a partnership with them, because that might put them in a very difficult position when the assessors are then assessing the applications. So we have our Korean partners as part of the assessment process. They don't score the assessment process, but they are as part of the assessment process. And therefore, to keep them separate in terms of conflicts of interest, we're not expecting potential applicants on the UK side to work in depth with them to hone UK proposals. They're here to provide information. Okay. When we come to the scoring and assessment process, the Korean partners are involved in that. We don't want to select a project which is completely unrealistic, and so we need to refer to their.
It's got to make sense to them.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's got to make sense to them for it to fly. If it doesn't make sense to them, then there's no point.
Yeah. So they're here to provide you with information. They're not here to prepare an application for you, if that makes sense. Okay. Great. Are there any questions from online? No. In that case, yeah. It's Andy, sorry. Simon. No, he's Andy.
Thank you. Just for clarification, does that mean if people wish to get further information about the system in Korea, they should direct it through the same email address?
Yes, please.
You would forward that on.
Yeah, we're trying to capture all of the FAQs and then publish them for the benefit of everyone, because it's an open application process, so thank you. Okay, I hope that's clear to everyone. For those of us joining us online, thank you very much. We're ending the briefing session now. For those of you who are here, we do hope that you'll join us for lunch and that you can stay on after lunch, because I know that some of you are giving 2-minute presentations about your organisation. If you do have any questions, you're staying over lunch, aren't you? And Simon and myself, and of course our colleagues from Korea. So please come and find us, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Cheers.